we were talking about shechita yesterday. One of the interesting things here is, and this is part of, even when he's talking about it, he makes this point at the beginning. He says that he's commanded us to slaughter a beast, animal, or bird, and then to eat its meat, and that it only be permissible to eat their meat by slaughtering it. And that is, may he be saying, and you may slaughter any of the cattle or sheep. The reason this has to be said this way is because while they were in the desert, the only meat, and by meat, I'm talking about cattle or sheep. The only meat they were allowed to eat was meat that had been part of a offering. They were not allowed to eat meat just if they wanted it. They were allowed to have birds for some reason. And this comes up, in some unfortunate circumstances where they were complaining about how they want meat, and then birds came. And it is sort of surprising. They're asking for basar. Why do birds come? Why are they getting birds? So, and it could be that the reason they're getting birds is because they for some reason, while they're in the desert, Hashem doesn't want people eating cattle or sheep just for pleasure. So, but they are allowed to eat birds. It says that the quail came and they ate it, and it makes it seem like that was going to be a part of their diet from then on. They're going to have mun, and then they're able to eat birds. So it's an interesting distinction that's made about birds, that birds are considered meat, and they do require shechita. That's what it seems like. If you just look at the discussion in the desert, it seems clear that the birds are considered meat because they asked for meat, and they were given birds, and they didn't complain and say, "You said we're going to give us meat, you only gave us birds." So we'll assume that they considered birds meat, basar, meat, and but they're for some reason not able to eat cattle and sheep. Also, it's again amongst the things that could be considered meat, because they have flesh, are animals, birds, also fish. But fish do not require shechita. Only birds and animals. Fish do not require shechita for some reason. So you have this kind of interesting things like they're in some ways they share properties, in some ways they don't. It's sort of interesting to speculate what is different about each one. I guess the other thing that could be considered flesh are grasshoppers, where they are allowed to eat grasshoppers, and also grasshoppers don't have to be shechted. There was a Yemenite rabbi who I was friendly with when I was teaching at Or Sameach, who showed me they have their equivalent of, let's say, the Mishnah Brura. In other words, or the Shulchan Aruch Harav. In the late 1800s, early 1900s, a whole series of books came out that were kind of halacha digests that were meant for the layperson to bone up on their on the halachas that they would need in order to live a rich halachic lifestyle. So, because being able to come to a definitive halachic position based on the Shulchan Aruch was something for scholars. So all sorts of works came out. There was one of them is one of the most famous is called the Kitzer Shulchan Aruch, which is the abridged. It's often translated as an abridged Shulchan Aruch. That was written in Hungary. But there's also a work called the Chachmas Adam. There's the work, the Shulchan Aruch Harav, which is written even a little bit earlier, which was from Rav Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the first Lubavitcher Rebbe. There's something called the Chachmas Adam or Chaye Adam, something called the Chaye Adam. Just a whole group of these works that were written. There was also, and so for Sfardim, there was one called the Kaf HaChaim, then famously for Litvaks and for the world in general. There was a Mishnah Berurah, but there's also a Yemenite one, and I don't remember the name of it. So he showed me in the Yemenite kind of abridged Shulchan Aruch that this person was writing it was saying that when he was a child I think in Yemen, his teacher, they were sitting outside and his teacher was teaching them about the fact that when it comes to the kosher grasshoppers, they don't need shchita, and he just caught one to illustrate it, and broke off the head. I'm assuming he took off the legs and the wings, and then he just ate it. He made a bracha and he ate it. So in order to demonstrate that they don't need shchita. So I guess those would be the categories right off the top of my head. I'm going to say those are the categories. You've got grasshoppers, you have birds, you have fish, and you have animals. So for some reason, in the desert, we're not eating animals unless they are part of a korban. So this goes back, this becomes part of a discussion about vegetarianism in halacha, whether or not vegetarianism is a admirable lifestyle as far as from a halachic context or from a Torah, hashkafa context. And so this gets mentioned that they weren't eating meat while they were in the desert. That added to the fact that it seems like from Adam to Noach, they weren't supposed to eat meat, suggests that there is a kind of elevated spiritual context where eating meat would be wrong. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean you'd be a vegetarian, because there's no discussion of fish. In fact, as part of my museum of things you would expect to find in the Torah but do not, fish is one of the topics. And one of my questions about fish is, do you think Adam and Eve could eat fish? They were near rivers, because it talks about there being rivers in Eden. There's and so clearly they would be near fish. And there's no discussion about fish one way or the other. God doesn't suggest fish. So you could say that means they weren't supposed to eat fish. But when you do see the discussions of what they weren't supposed to eat, the fish are also not mentioned there. And there's even in Noach, when you finally get permission to eat meat, they seem to be talking about cattle and sheep, or, the relatives of cattle and sheep, mammals that chew their cud and have split feet. Or I don't know. I don't even know if that was limited. They're allowed to eat animals, but there's no discussion about fish, whether there's a new permit. Was it ever forbidden? There's also no discussion about birds as to whether they were allowed to eat birds. And if you're going to look at what happened in the desert as guidance, you would think that maybe there's some kind of problem with eating larger animals, mammals, but maybe that it wasn't considered problematic, or from a spiritual perspective for them. It wasn't at the time problematic for them to eat birds. So let's say Adam and Eve, could they have eaten birds? They can't eat meat, but could they eat birds? Could they eat fish? Could they eat grasshoppers? So I don't know. what to say. There's not a lot about it, but certainly it's just super interesting that to me, that in the desert, there's no problem with them eating birds. Even though there is a problem with them eating meat. And therefore in Deuteronomy, in Devarim, when it's talking about eating meat, they have to be told it because they weren't allowed to eat meat before. The thing is, if birds are not in the same category, then why do birds require shechita? Also, apparently there was a textbook. I was shown this textbook from a distance, a German textbook, which shows that by the anatomy of animals that chew their cud and have split hooves, there is an anatomical difference where the carotid, what is that called? The artery that's in the neck. It's not the jugular. What's it called?
Lois says catoroid.
Artery?
Catoroid.
Something like that. Right.
Yeah, I'm looking at carotid. No, you're right. Carotid. The carotid. The carotid artery. So in this German textbook, it pointed out that the carotid, that's what we call it, carotid.
That's it.
Carotid. The carotid artery is in a different place. I'm just going to see if it comes up now when I do it. And that when you do shechita on an animal, you will inevitably cut the carotid artery. And that the result of cutting the carotid artery is immediate senselessness. In other words, they become immediately unconscious, what we would call unconscious. This is not the case with animals that do not chew their cud and have split hooves. This was what we were told. I saw this book from a distance. Obviously, even if I read it, it was in German, I wouldn't be able to verify all the details. But so let's say you shechted a pig, it's not going to have the same result as shechting a cow, because with the cow, it's immediately unconscious the minute you shecht it. With a pig, it may not be, because the carotid artery is not in the same place. Now, and I'm assuming that this is also true with birds. So that's why I'm bringing it up, because over there, they were just pointing out this interesting fact that animals that chew their cud and have split hooves have this added shechita benefit. Now, it could be with birds, it doesn't matter where it is, it's getting cut because their neck is, small, and it could be, or I don't know if they have carotid artery or whatever.
When you shecht a bird, isn't that just breaking its neck? There's an incision actually made on a bird?
Yeah, that little knife, that Lois's knife there. It's actually a very.
That was for chickens.
That's what I mean by no. With a bird, it's the same thing. All birds, not just chickens, all birds need shechita.
Oh,
all
really?
birds need shechita. Yeah.
I thought it was just don't they also just break its neck?
Isn't that what there is? There is the for sacrifices, and this would apply to doves and turtle doves. For sacrifices, the Kohen uses his thumbnail. It's called malika. He uses his thumbnail. It's a very sharpened thumbnail, and he shechts the animal from behind. But that's only for sacrifices. For
breaking
regular,
the neck.
It's not breaking it. It's also cutting it, because he's supposed to cut it with his thumbnail. It's a sharpened thumbnail, and he's supposed to cut it from behind. But that's only sacrifices. Regular, if you're shechting an animal, a bird, for consumption, you have to do it the same way you do a chicken. You use that same knife, and you pull back the head and shecht it in the same place.
Okay. Okay.
Now it
Thank you.
does. They call it the carotid body, not the carotid artery in birds, but there is something carotid in a bird. Now I just want to see if they say that thing about the other animals. So I'm just sort of interested in, because what happens with birds? Do they have immediate unconsciousness when you shock them? Animals. Chew code.
I mean, they're so anatomically different, it would hard to be seen
Right.
how you could make a thing. But it could be with the other thing, because breaking its neck for sure would render it unconscious
Right, but
instantly.
there's no breaking neck going on with birds.
Yes.
All right, so 1 second. Same thing. All right, biology here. Except on cookies.
I
This
remember
question is not for the squeamish. I was told the non-kosher animal like pigs have a different anatomy in their neck compared to kosher animals like cows. Rabbi Zamir Cohn, in his book, The Coming Revolution, Science Discovers the Truths of the Bible, quotes modern day scientists that have made an incredible discovery of a major difference in the way the blood flows in the species that are kosher and those that are not. In non-kosher animals, the vertebral arteries flow directly to the brain through the ret mirable. However, in cloven-hoofed cud-chewing animals and permitted fowl, so that I don't know why he threw in permitted fowl, the vertebral arteries drain into the carotid artery and do not have a direct flow to the brain. There will therefore be an immediate drop in blood pressure at the time of shechita that causes the animal to lose consciousness, thus feeling no pain. But they threw in permissive animals, birds, because if you could do that, then you just look at whatever birds have that anatomy and you'd say those are the kosher birds. What is like digestion? Niche meat professor. All right, this is called Niche Meat Processor Assistance Network. Really advice for everything, and that's .org. According to the USDA, an animal is considered kosher, believe it or not. The USDA. An animal is considered kosher if it is a ruminant and has split or cloven hooves. For red meat, this means deer, antelope, goats, sheep, bovines can be kosher. Okay, to be a certified kosher, an animal must be slaughtered by a special trained Jewish man. The shoichet. The shoichet is trained to use a special knife called the chalaf.
One question I have.
Yeah.
I remember just reading something. It was a snippet, and it says that for proper shechita, the animal has to be stunned. Now, is that stunning supposed to be? Is that the initial? Huh? There's no such thing.
No, it could be modern in America. In America, they may require it because of American regulations, but otherwise,
but not by halakha.
No,
got it.
No. In fact, if stunning was done, you'd want to know how, because it can't be done in a way that would cause the animal to be a treifa. So you'd want to know for sure that there's no harm or damage to the internal animal. Like, let's say somebody thinks stun and he whacks it over the head with a bat or something, or a club.
You might have electric shock. They use it on people.
Right, so, but even then, I'd want to make sure that didn't cause internal injuries, because if it somehow caused, if the shocking caused some kind of internal injury, then you'd want to know. I mean, there's other worse things. There's my son, AY, as one of his several jobs, supervises milking for cheese making. I mean, he does he supervises, depending on what they need, he supervises all different parts of the process, but sometimes he's there for the milking. And in order for it to be supervised kosher, they have to separate out the cows who have had a particular surgery. Apparently, there's a surgery that is done to some milk cows that apparently there's a kind of injury that's not uncommon in milk cows. And there's a rather simple surgery that can be done to repair it, but the repair actually makes the cow trafe. Because I don't know all the details, but it's obviously cutting something that internally that now makes the cow trafe. And if the cow's trafe, her milk is not kosher. You cannot have milk from a trafe cow. That's a rule. You can't have milk from a trafe cow. Whatever comes out of a trafe animal is itself trafe. So, or not kosher. So he told me, like when I was supervising the milking of cows, I did it once when I was I would say about 40 years ago. And there was no separating any cows. And this was for a Chalav Yisrael place that was trying to be careful about everything. It could be they didn't have that surgery then, I don't know. But now he has to first verify that the cows with the surgery have been separated from the milking herd. And then those cows, the other cows are then milked, and he's supervising that for the Chalav Yisrael cheese. So this is another thing like you wouldn't imagine you have to be concerned about. And also with chickens, there were these shots they were giving antibiotics to chickens. I think there are many that still do it because there were all these diseases that were going through these enormous chicken coops where they were, housing all the chickens that they're raising for chicken. So they would give them antibiotics, and there had to be care about where you were giving them the shot. It's possible that by giving them the shot, you make the chicken trafe. Now, this is in particular egg-laying chickens. And the problem is that if the chicken is trafe, the eggs are trafe. So there are these moments where people in the food industry, just because the food industry has become so complex, there are all these things that come up that you have to really know the industry in order to be able to anticipate what some of these problems could be. But that's another thing. Okay. Anything else in the stream of consciousness about Shechita? Oh yeah, he said in that article, which was not a halachic article, but there's no mention here about who can shecht. It just said the laws and all its details are discussed in Maseches Chulin. So I just want to look up this one topic, which is, can a woman shecht?
I believe so.
I'm going to say it has to be, because otherwise, how would a family eat meat? There's so many families that where you can imagine throughout history where the woman is running the household, and how would they eat meat? So I'm just going to wait. Sorry.
Let me finish this.
Now, I've learned this probably at least 10 times, probably 20 times, this information. And it just,
Yes, and half of those times I've told you, or loads have told you, that in Chabad, they don't poskin their way. Unless you don't have to have a man, you have to have a beard.
A bearded lady can do it.
A bearded lady might be able to do it.
It's easy.
All right, we'll look at Chabad second, since you're saying there might be a difference there. Let's look at Halachapedia. Women. Although women are technically permitted to shech, the custom is that they do not at all, despite their skill, as they are more likely to recoil from the bloody and gory experience and risk making a mistake. Therefore, one may not authorize a woman to be a shoichet, but if she shechs under close supervision on her own and confidently claims she did everything correctly, it would be kosher. It has to be, because how are these people eating in those times when they had farms and they're relying on their own shechita? There was no, unless you lived in a city, you're not, you're most often going to have your own shechita. Maybe there was a shoichet that would go around in the city, but for a lot of them, I'm assuming they'd have to rely on it. But if she shechs under close supervision on her own and confidently claims she did everything correctly, it would be kosher. If she did it on her own and is not present to vouch for herself, we must assume it is not kosher, as she deviated from common practice, and therefore we will not rely on the Rav. If the local custom is to allow them to shech, then this does not apply. But she still should not be appointed to be a communal shoichet due to the greater chance of making a mistake at high volumes of kill. It's just so funny, because if you watch farm, like Andrew Zimmern on Bizarre Foods, the men have nothing to do with the food preparation. Nothing. The women are going out, they get the chicken, they twist the neck of the chicken or the duck or the goose or whatever they're having. The women are doing the entire thing. The men are not anywhere near the process. In almost any culture that's eating things the way they used to, like in Uzbekistan or places like that, when he goes to so it's just so funny that there came to be this thinking. All right, anyways, here we go. Now let's look at the Chabad. It doesn't say anything about the beard here. Only a Jew specifically trained for shechita can perform shechita. He is required to study for a number of years and is examined in theory and practice in the laws of shechita, animal anatomy, and pathology. He serves an apprenticeship with an experienced shoichet before becoming fully qualified. The position of shoichet as a God-fearing person of integrity is a respected one in the Jewish community. So there, they don't mention a beard. Let's see if anybody else does. I'm just going to put beard. Oh no, I don't want to do this. Even though they're talking about Hasidic things, I don't want to go
there. That's what we've been told. It
right.
right.
I'm sure they're not. Some of these things are just. So it just goes on to beards. They can't. Once you put beard there, that's all they want to talk about is beards. Just gonna look at one more thing here. See if.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
I put into Google, does a Chabad shochet need a beard? And what came up is there is more to a beard than just identifying as a Jew. According to Kabbalah, the beard should not even be trimmed, but should be allowed to be. But it doesn't say about the shochet.
Okay.
Well, maybe it will later.
All right. Let's just.
Are we going to have to get into the problem of transgender shkoti?
Well, if I would assume if women technically can do it and men can do it, then unless that's true, there is a opinion in the Gemara that an androgynous person is a third type. There's men, women, and androgynous people, and that they're actually a third type. They're not men or women, they're a third type. So there it would be here. Oh, Blue Greenberg. We get into Blue Greenberg. According to Greenberg, this is first a guy named something Greenberg 29. Where's Greenberg? Greenberg. Yedidia Greenberg, a Boulder, Colorado-based animal welfare educator and shoichet. So he says here, on his blog, The Kosher Omnivore's Quest, Greenberg has gained a legion of followers in the Jewish food movement. People contact him on a regular basis. Regarding Shechita, he says, and it's not just men. According to Greenberg, more than 5 women have reached out to him in the past 18 months seeking a rabbi who will teach them kosher slaughter. Greenberg doesn't know where to point them. While there's no specific Jewish law barring women from performing the ritual, Greenberg believes women have a right, as much a right to shecht as men. Orthodox tradition is that women do not slaughter. No Orthodox rabbi would teach a woman how to shecht. Yeah, that might be, again, in some shechita school, but if she is a farmer who's living on a farm, a homemaker from Fairlawn recently paid a shoichet $100 to travel to nearby Passaic to slaughter just 2 chickens. She had to do all the plucking and cleaning up herself. It's not cost effective. Yitzhak Adlerstein, an Orthodox rabbi who teaches Jewish law and ethics out in Los Angeles, said it is arisable that amateurs believe they are capable of deciphering complex instructional texts on religious slaughter. Anyways, yeah, so this is a little bit, you could see it's a little bit controversial, but it can't, I'm just saying, if people are living out in rural places, you can say everything you want to. If somebody's living out in a rural place and they're the one responsible for the food in some, you know that as long as it's technically okay, somebody's going to figure out how to do it. All right. And with that,
wait, we have two. I have my question
No,
first.
mine's just a comment. Go ahead.
What about in the case of moil? Can a moil be a woman?
yeah, that will have to be another subject. We will
Okay.
talk about
Yeah.
that. Have to be, yeah.
We're
So,
not on tomorrow, right? For
we are
some reason?
not. Yeah, I'm
Okay.
going to St. Louis to visit my mother.
Oh,
By
very
train.
nice.
By train.
Okay, good trip. I just wanted to tell you, I was watching the movie Song of Love, which is the story of Robert Schumann and Clara. And
Yeah.
Brahms comes to live with them, which he did. And they were having a dinner for people, and Clara gives the chicken to Brahms to shecht, I guess,
Yeah.
and he goes, "Are you kidding? I can't touch that." And she's the one who does it. So it was.
That's what, if you see any film about like on a farm, when it comes to preparing what farmers do, and also like when you go to these cultures like in Uzbekistan and all these other kind of places, if you go to those places and they're dealing with chickens, goose, birds, or whatever, it's the women.
Right.
It's the women. They're twisting the necks, they're doing whatever it is to kill them, but it's the women. The men are not involved in it. Now it could
All
be
right.
with larger animals they are, because you have to hold it could be you have to hold the animal down in order to
Yeah.
kill. So
Right,
there I
right.
could see the men being involved.